My story begins on a dusty platform under a sun that showed no mercy. The air in Redemption Springs was thick with grit and judgment, and I was at the center of it all. My name is Lily Bradford, though out here, I was just another piece of property. The auctioneer, a sweaty man named Wade, droned on about my late father's debts. $300. That was the price of my life, the price of his mistakes. Next up, Wade shouted, his voice cracking in the heat. Miss Lillian Bradford, age 25, from Boston, the crowd murmured. Men size me up like livestock. Women clutch their children, pulling them away from the spectacle of a fallen woman. My wrists were raw from the rope, but I held my spine straight, just like my father, Colonel Jonathan Bradford, had taught me. A Bradford never shows weakness, especially when surrounded by enemies. She can read and write, Wade continued, reading from a crumpled paper. Educated as a music teacher, specializes in piano. A big miner with a greasy beard spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. What good's a piano player out here? Can she cook? Can she work a field? Humiliation burned my cheeks. I was the daughter of a Union Army colonel, reduced to this. His gambling, his debts, his fall from grace. They had stripped me of everything. My home, my future, my dignity. Something inside me snapped. I lifted my chin, my voice ringing out clear and strong. Laugh if you must, but I am not merchandise. I am a person. The crowd fell silent, shocked by my defiance. Even the auctioneer looked stunned. And that's when I saw him. He was standing in the shadows of the mercantile, a tall figure who carried himself like a soldier. A nasty scar ran from his temple to his jaw, pulling tight as he frowned. He had the coldest gray eyes I'd ever seen, and they were fixed on me with an unnerving intensity. He was a man who had seen too much, and I had a feeling he was about to see a whole lot more. Just as the silence became unbearable, another voice cut through the air, a voice as slick and polished as the man it belonged to. I'll give you $50 for her. The crowd parted to reveal Edgar Stone, the man who owned nearly everything in Redemption Springs, including the Golden Lady Saloon and the richest gold mine in the territory. A cruel smile played on his lips as he twirled his waxed mustache. He looked at me not like a man looks at a woman, but like a wolf looks at its prey. And in that moment, I knew I had traded one kind of hell for another. The auctioneer, relieved to have a bidder, quickly called out, $50 from Mr. Stone. Do I hear 60? The crowd was silent. No one dared bid against Edgar Stone. His reputation was as dark as the mines he owned. Girls who worked at his saloon had a habit of disappearing. Men who crossed him had a habit of turning up dead. My heart sank. This was it. This was my fate. Then a voice, rough and low, cut through the tension. 60. Every head turned. The tall man with the scar stepped out from the shadows. The sun hit his face, revealing prematurely graying hair at his temples and a look that could curdle milk. I'd heard whispers about him. Maxwell Sullivan, a reclusive rancher, a former Union captain who came back from the war with a limp and a ghost in his eyes. Stone's smile tightened. Well, well, Captain Sullivan graces us with his presence. He sneered the rank. 75. 100, Max Sullivan countered without a single hesitation. A gasp went through the crowd. $100 was a fortune out here. Stone's eyes narrowed into slits. The game was on. 150, Stone drawled, his gaze flicking to me. 200, Max shot back, his voice like stone. Stone laughed, a nasty grating sound. The good captain seems mighty eager. Perhaps he knows something about Miss Bradford that we don't. He turned his cruel smile on me. Or perhaps he doesn't know about her terrible secret. Ice flooded my veins, my past, my shame. How could he know? My moment of defiance crumbled. I felt the eyes of the entire town on me, judging me, condemning me. From the steps of the hotel, an old woman with sharp, knowing eyes watched the whole thing. Her name was Eleanor Quinn. She'd seen everything this town had to offer, and her face was a mask of concern. 250, Max said, his voice a low growl. He wasn't taking Stone's bait. 300, Stone replied instantly. The full amount of the debt. He thought he had him. His smile was triumphant. Max hesitated, just for a second. It felt like an eternity. He looked at me, his gray eyes unreadable. Then he turned back to Stone. $350. The crowd gasped as one. It was an insane amount of money. Unheard of. Stone's confident facade finally cracked. He stared at Max, his face a mixture of fury and disbelief. He'd been beaten. Publicly. After a long, tense silence, he gave a curt nod. "She's all yours, Captain." His voice dropped to a menacing whisper. "For now." Stone stalked away, his expensive boots kicking up dust like a warning. The auctioneer's hammer finally came down. "Sold! To Mr. Sullivan for $350. I stood there, frozen. Had I been saved? Or had I just been sold to a different kind of monster? This silent, scarred man who had just paid a fortune for me, a man who looked at me like he was staring at a ghost. Max Sullivan paid the auctioneer without a word, then walked up to the platform. Up close, I could see the lines of hardship etched around his eyes. He offered me his hand. His touch was firm, steady, but completely impersonal. As he led me toward a worn-out wagon, Eleanor Quinn, the hotel owner, stepped into our path. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, her voice surprisingly strong for a woman her age, "the young lady will need some things." Max looked like the thought had never even occurred to him. "I've put together a package," she continued, pointing to a brown paper parcel on the hotel steps. "Decency demands it." She turned her sharp eyes on me. "You hold your head up, child. This town is quick to judge, but not everyone here is without a heart." It was a strange, unexpected kindness. Max retrieved the package and helped me onto the wagon bench. The ride out of town was silent. The only sounds were the creak of the wheels and the steady clop of the horses' hooves. The Nevada landscape stretched out around us, vast and empty and unforgiving. Finally, when the last building of Redemption Springs had disappeared behind us, I found my voice. "Why did you do that?" I asked, staring straight ahead. "Why pay so much for a stranger?" He kept his eyes on the trail. "You needed help." "Many people need help," I countered. "You can't save them all." A muscle in his jaw twitched. "No, but sometimes a man gets a chance to do one right thing." I took mine. His answer told me nothing and everything. It was a wall, and I knew better than to try and climb it. We rode for what felt like hours until we turned onto a narrow path. "Circle S Ranch," he said, nodding toward a ridge. "My home." When we crested the hill, I caught my breath. Below us lay a small green valley, an oasis in the middle of nowhere. A solid log house stood by a meandering creek, with a large barn and horses grazing peacefully in a pasture. It was beautiful. "It was my wife's choice," he said, his voice softer than I'd heard it. "Ruth had an eye for beauty." The past tense hung in the air. He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. Before we got down, he turned to me, his gray eyes serious. "Miss Bradford, I want to be clear. I paid your debt, but I do not own you. You are not my property." I stared at him, confused. "You will work for fair wages," he continued. "Cooking, cleaning. In return, you'll have room and board. When you decide to leave, you are free to go. No questions asked." Relief was quickly followed by suspicion. Men didn't offer something for nothing. "And what else will be expected of me, Mr. Sullivan?" I asked bluntly. A flash of anger crossed his face, but it was quickly replaced by something that looked like weary understanding. "Nothing of that nature. You have my word. Your door will have a lock. Only you will have the key. In this house, you are safe." The conviction in his voice was absolute. I believed him. "Thank you," I whispered. "Max," he corrected. "Call me Max." "Then you must call me Lily." He helped me down from the wagon and led me inside. The main room was spacious but Spartan. A huge stone fireplace, a simple table, a worn sofa. But my eyes were drawn to the corner. A piano. Its dark wood gleamed in the afternoon light. It was well used but clearly cherished. "It was Ruth's," Max said, his voice flat. "She played every evening." My fingers itched to touch the keys. "May I?" He hesitated, then gave a single nod. "It shouldn't be silent." I sat on the bench, my posture shifting from memory. I placed my hands on the keys and began to play. The notes were slightly out of tune, but they filled the room, chasing away the shadows. I played a simple piece, a melody of loss and longing. Max stood motionless, his face an unreadable mask. When the last note faded, he cleared his throat. It needs tuning. I can do that, I offered. He nodded toward the stairs. Your room is upstairs, first on the right. Mine's at the end of the hall. He paused, a flicker of pain crossing his features. The room between, it's just for storage now. He turned and walked out, leaving me alone with the piano and the ghosts of his house. I went upstairs, my heart heavy with unspoken questions. My room was simple, clean, and welcoming, but my curiosity drew me to the middle door, the storage room. My hand hesitated on the knob. I knew I shouldn't. It was his private grief, but I had to understand the man who held my fate in his hands. I turned the knob. The room was a child's bedroom, perfectly preserved. A small bed, a toy chest, a rocking chair. On the wall hung a portrait of a beautiful woman with dark hair, holding a little girl, with her mother's smile and her father's gray eyes. Ruth and their daughter. That was Sarah's room. I gasped and spun around. Max was standing in the doorway, his face shadowed and unreadable. I'm so sorry, I stammered. I shouldn't have. No, you shouldn't have. He cut me off, his voice flat. But he stepped into the room and pulled back the curtains, letting sunlight flood the dusty space. But since you have, you might as well know. His voice was controlled, but the pain beneath it was a raw, open wound. Ruth and Sarah, fever took them both. 3 years ago, within a week of each other. He stared at the portrait. Sarah was 6. My heart ached for him, this silent, wounded man. He turned back to me, his expression hardening. This house has ghosts, Miss Bradford, not the kind that rattle chains, the kind that live in memory. You should know that if you're going to stay. He left without another word, closing the door softly behind him, sealing his grief back inside. And I realized I hadn't escaped one prison just to land in another. I had walked right into a mausoleum, a house where everything was already dead. The days at Circle S settled into a quiet, fragile rhythm. I learned to cook on a wood stove, to tend a garden, to mend clothes. My hands, once soft enough for the piano, grew calloused and strong. I was earning my keep, building a new kind of life, one measured in loaves of bread and clean laundry. Max was a patient teacher, if a silent one. We rarely spoke of anything personal. His past was locked away in Sarah's room, and mine was a secret I guarded with my life. The only time we connected was in the evenings. He would sit on the porch, smoking his pipe, and I would play Ruth's piano. The music filled the space between us, saying all the things we couldn't. About 3 weeks after I arrived, a wagon came up the road. It was Eleanor Quinn, the hotel owner, with a younger woman. We've come with a proposition, Eleanor announced over coffee. The proposition was simple. The church needed a music teacher for the children. The position had been vacant for a year. My heart leaped. To teach again, to have a purpose beyond chores. It felt like a lifeline. But given how I arrived here, I said carefully, I'm not sure it would be proper. Nonsense, Eleanor sniffed. Half the people in this territory are running from something. What matters is what you do now. I looked at Max. He'd been silent the whole time. It's your decision, Lily, he said. If you want to teach, I'll drive you into town on Sundays. And just like that, it was settled. A piece of my old life was being handed back to me. A dangerous piece. Going into town meant being visible. It meant risking a run-in with Edgar Stone. Later in the barn, I asked Max if it was wise. After what Mr. Stone said at the auction about my secret, Max's hands stilled on the horse he was brushing. Stone is a snake. He talks to hear the sound of his own voice. He turned to face me, his gray eyes searching mine. Do you want to tell me what he thinks he knows? Because if trouble is coming, I'd rather face it head on. My heart hammered. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to share the suffocating weight of my secret, but the fear was too great. The shame was too deep. It's complicated, I managed to say. He studied me for a long moment. Fair enough, he said, turning back to the horse. But just so you know, whatever it is, I doubt it's as bad as you think, and I doubt it would change my mind about you. His words were a small comfort, but they didn't erase the fear. What would he think if he knew the truth? That my father wasn't just a gambler, but a man accused of being a traitor to the Union. That I was accused of being his accomplice. That the name Bradford was poison back in Boston. My first Sunday teaching was a joy. The children were hungry for music, their bright faces a balm to my wounded soul. For a few hours I wasn't the woman from the auction block. I was Miss Bradford, the music teacher. But the peace didn't last. As the last child left, the church door opened. Edgar Stone stepped inside, immaculate and smiling his predator's smile. Miss Bradford, he purred, his eyes glinting with malice. How wonderful to see you putting your talents to use. I was just wondering, have you had any correspondence from Boston lately? Old friends, perhaps? Inquiring after your well-being? The threat was unmistakable. He knew. He'd been digging. Eleanor Quinn, who had stayed to help me, stepped subtly to my side, a silent show of support. I left Boston behind me, Mr. Stone, I said, my voice colder than I felt. So I heard, he mused. Such a mystery, a respected colonel's daughter, vanishing in the night. It does make one wonder what secrets a person might be hiding. He settled his hat on his head. Life takes unexpected turns, doesn't it? Sometimes those turns bring you face to face with a past you thought you'd escaped. He left, leaving a chill in the air. On the ride home, I told Max what Stone had said. His hands tightened on the reins. He implied he knows why I left Boston, I whispered. Whatever it is, Max said, his voice a low growl, this is your home now. I won't turn you out because of something that happened before you came here. His loyalty should have comforted me. Instead, it terrified me. He was defending a woman he didn't even know, a woman whose secret was big enough and ugly enough to destroy them both. The peace I had found at Circle S was a lie. It was just the quiet before a storm I knew was coming to wipe us all away. The weeks that followed were a fragile illusion of peace. My music lessons flourished. The children adored me. In town, some of the suspicious glares had softened into tentative smiles. At the ranch, a comfortable routine settled between Max and me. We still didn't talk about the past, but a quiet understanding was growing between us. It was a beautiful lie, and it was about to be torn to shreds. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, on the ride home from church. The day had been perfect. The lessons had gone well. Max had even attended the service, a huge step for him. We were halfway back to the ranch when he broke the silence. Lily, he began, his voice strained, there's something I should have told you from the start. I turned, alarmed by his tone. It's about your father, he said, his knuckles white on the reins. Colonel Bradford. My blood ran cold. You knew him. He nodded, a sharp, painful motion. We met at Gettysburg, on opposite sides of the field. My mind reeled. But my father was Union, and I was Union too, he confirmed. But we were on opposite sides of a different kind of battle. He took a deep, shaky breath. My men were sent into a trap, an ambush. We were being cut to pieces. I thought we were done for. The old wounds on his face seemed to ache with the memory. Then your father and his men arrived. They'd been ordered elsewhere, but he disobeyed those orders when he heard the fighting. He led a counterattack that saved my life, and the lives of what was left of my company. I was stunned. My father, the disgraced gambler, had been a hero. He was wounded, Max continued. I helped carry him to the field hospital. While we waited, he showed me a photograph he carried. His wife and his daughter, a young woman at a piano. He finally turned to look at me, his gray eyes filled with a storm of emotions. It was you, Lily. I recognized you the moment I saw you on that auction block. The world tilted. He hadn't bought me out of kindness. He'd bought me out of debt. A life for a life. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. At first I wasn't sure. And then, I didn't know how. I made him a promise that day. He made me swear that if I ever met his Lily, I'd watch over her for him. The kindness, the safety, the home he'd given me, it was all just an obligation, a promise to a dead man. The hurt was sharp and sudden, a knife twisting in my gut. I see, I said, my voice ice. Well, you fulfilled your duty, Mr. Sullivan. I'm sure my father would be grateful. Lily, it wasn't just about the promise, he protested. Please, I cut him off. I understand perfectly. And I think it's best if I make plans to move on as soon as possible. He looked stricken. There's no need, but before he could finish, as we pulled up to the ranch, he suddenly went rigid. Stay in the wagon, he ordered, his voice dropping into the hard command of a soldier. I followed his gaze. The front door of the house was hanging open, the wood around the lock splintered and broken. Someone had been here. Max reached under the seat and pulled out a rifle. His face was a mask of cold fury. The quiet rancher was gone. The Union captain was back. He disappeared into the house. The silence that followed was terrifying. Every second stretched into an eternity. Finally, he reappeared in the doorway. They're gone, he called out. But they were looking for something. I rushed inside. The main room was destroyed. Furniture overturned, books ripped from shelves. The desk in the corner was in pieces, its contents scattered everywhere. They weren't looking for money, Max said, his eyes scanning the chaos. They were looking for something specific. Something of yours. My heart stopped. My letters. The few things I'd managed to bring from Boston. My father's last letter, the one that could be twisted to look like proof of his treason. I ran upstairs. My room was ransacked, the mattress slashed, my trunk ripped apart. I scrambled to the loose floorboard under the window, my hands shaking. I pried it up. The small, oilskin-wrapped package was still there, untouched. They didn't find it, I whispered, clutching it to my chest. Find what? Max was standing in the doorway watching me. I knew in that moment that the time for secrets was over. The past hadn't just caught up to me. It had kicked down the door and invaded our home. You should sit down, I said, my voice trembling. It's time you knew exactly who and what you paid for. In the wreckage of the kitchen, with the scent of destruction still hanging in the air, I told him everything. I told him about my father, Colonel Jonathan Bradford. Not just a hero at Gettysburg, but a man with dangerous ideas. He believed in reconciliation, not punishment for the South. He maintained correspondence with old friends across enemy lines, trying to build bridges to understand. Washington saw it as treason, I explained, my hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. They investigated him. His career was ruined, his reputation destroyed. Max listened, his face grim, his silence a heavy weight in the room. After the war, it got worse. The accusations resurfaced. They forced him to resign, stripped him of his pension. That's when the gambling started. It wasn't just a weakness, it was an escape from the shame. I finally pulled the oilskin package from my pocket and carefully unwrapped the letters. My father's last letter. This is what they were looking for, I said, my voice barely a whisper. This is what Stone wants. Max's eyes were locked on the letter. What is it? It's the truth, I said. My father wasn't a sympathizer. He was a spy, working for the Union. Understanding dawned in Max's eyes. A double agent. Exactly. He was part of a secret operation, sanctioned by General Meade himself. He fed low-level information to his Southern contacts to gain their trust, while gathering critical intelligence that helped win key battles. He was a hero, Max, not a traitor. My voice cracked with years of unshed tears. But the operation was so secret, when the accusations started, he had no proof. The men who could have cleared his name were dead or gone. And I helped him. I wrote letters for him, passed messages. They accused me of being his accomplice. The shame washed over me again, as fresh as the day I fled Boston. When I heard they were building a case against me, I ran. I thought I could disappear out here. Until Stone found you, Max finished, his voice a low growl. But how? He has connections, I guessed. He must have heard the name Bradford and started digging. Max stood up, his body radiating a cold, controlled anger. He doesn't have proof. If he did, he wouldn't have needed to tear this place apart. He's fishing. But he's getting closer, I said, despair creeping in. I've put you in danger. He'll use this against both of us. No, I stood up, my fear hardening into resolve. I won't let you risk your life for me. This is my fight. It became my fight the moment I saw you on that auction block, Max countered, his gray eyes blazing. And it would be my fight even if I'd never known your father. This is my home, Lily, and no one threatens what's mine. The possessive way he said it sent a jolt through me. It wasn't about obligation anymore. This was personal. Beside, he added, a grim smile touching his lips, I've been looking for an excuse to put Stone in his place for years. You just gave me a damn good one. He picked up his rifle and checked the chamber. Tomorrow we ride into town. We're going to see Doc Reynolds. If Stone is making moves, Samuel will have heard the whispers. It's time we stopped running from this fight and started taking it to them. As we worked together to put the house back in order, a strange calm settled over me. The secret was out. The worst was known. And I wasn't facing it alone. The next morning we rode into Redemption Springs. The town felt different. The air was thick with tension. People stared as we passed, whispering behind their hands. Stone had already started poisoning the well. Dr. Reynolds' office was a sanctuary of calm. He was a kind man with sharp eyes that saw more than most. Someone broke into the ranch, Max said without preamble. We think it was Stone. The doctor's face grew grave. I was afraid of this. There have been rumors, Max. 3 men arrived in town last week. Strangers. They've been asking questions about you, Miss Bradford, and they've been talking about federal marshals and treason. My blood ran cold. They're not real marshals, Reynolds continued. They're hired guns. Thugs wearing badges Stone probably bought for them. Just then, the doctor's wife, Martha, hurried in, her face pale. Eleanor Quinn just sent a boy from the hotel, she said breathlessly. A man checked in late Saturday, an Easterner, John Harrington. I gasped. The name was like a ghost from my nightmares. You know him? Max asked sharply. He was my father's chief accuser, I explained, my voice shaking. The man who led the charge against me. If he's here, then this isn't just Stone's game anymore, Max finished, his face like granite. He's brought in the wolf who started the hunt. The walls were closing in. It wasn't just rumors anymore. It was a noose, and it was tightening around my neck. We stepped out of the doctor's office and into the hostile street, and there, standing in front of the general store, leaning on a silver-headed cane, was John Harrington himself. He smiled when he saw me, a cold, reptilian smile. Lillian Bradford, he said, his voice dripping with false cordiality. I've come a very long way to find you. It's time to answer for your crimes. The fight hadn't come to us. We had ridden right into the heart of it. The street fell silent. Everyone was watching. Harrington looked like a predator who had finally cornered his prey. I committed no crime, I said, my voice shaking but firm. Neither did my father. The evidence suggests otherwise, Harrington sneered. We found your letters, Lillian, the ones you wrote to your little friend in Richmond. It won't be hard to convince a jury they were coded messages for the Confederacy. He was twisting my past, turning innocent correspondence into a weapon. Before he could say more, Max stepped in front of me, a human shield. Is there a problem here? He asked, his voice deceptively calm. Harrington's eyes flickered with something like fear. He saw the soldier in Max, the man who wouldn't back down. Just renewing an old acquaintance, he said smoothly. We'll continue this conversation later, Miss Bradford, I assure you. As Max hustled me into the wagon, his body was tense with controlled violence. We're being followed, he said in a low voice as we rode out of town. I looked back. 2 riders were keeping their distance, but their intent was clear. Max didn't take the main road. He veered onto a narrow, winding trail through the pines, but it was no good. As we rounded a bend, 3 more men blocked the path. They wore badges, but their eyes were cold and hard. Hired guns. That's far enough, Sullivan, the leader called out. Federal marshals. We have a warrant for the arrest of Lillian Bradford on charges of treason. I don't recognize your authority, Max replied evenly, his hand dropping to the pistol at his hip. Interfering with federal officers is a crime, the man warned. Don't be a fool. These men aren't here for justice, Lily, Max murmured to me. They're here to collect a bounty. To the men, he said, you're going to turn around and ride back to Stone. Tell him if he wants Miss Bradford, he can come and try to take her himself. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought guns would be drawn. The air crackled with tension. Then the sound of hoofbeats. Dr. Reynolds came galloping around the bend, a rifle in his hands. Behind him were Thomas and Jacob, Max's two ranch hands, both armed and ready. The odds had just changed. The lead gunman's eyes narrowed. He looked from our group to his men. "This isn't over, Sullivan," he snarled. "We'll be watching. The moment she's alone, she's ours." "Then you'd better pack for a long wait," Max shot back, "because she won't be alone." They wheeled their horses and rode off, disappearing back toward town. "They'll be back," Max said grimly as we rode for the ranch, "and they'll bring more men." For the next 2 days, Circle S became a fortress. We boarded windows, set up watch posts. Dr. Reynolds brought news from town. Stone and Harrington were whipping the townspeople into a frenzy, painting me as a dangerous Confederate spy. Fear is a powerful poison, and they were pouring it into the town's water supply. On the third night, a massive storm rolled in. The wind howled like a banshee, and rain lashed against the house. I was playing the piano, the melancholy music a perfect match for the storm outside. Max stood by the window, watching the rain. "You play differently than Ruth did," he said suddenly. "She played every note perfectly. You play like the music is a part of your soul." His words touched me, a small warmth in the cold fear that had become my constant companion. "I never thanked you," I said softly, "for all of this." "You don't need to," he said, turning from the window. He walked over to the piano. "After Ruth and Sarah died, I was just existing, empty. Then I saw you on that auction block, and that first night you played this piano, you brought music back into this house. You brought life back." His confession hung in the air, a fragile, beautiful thing. Before I could respond, a massive clap of thunder shook the house, and in the same instant, the front door burst open. A figure, drenched and gasping, stumbled inside. "Eleanor!" Max exclaimed, rushing to help the old woman. "They're coming!" she choked out, shivering. "Tonight! Stone, Harrington, all of them! They're using the storm as cover." My heart stopped. "There's more," Eleanor gasped, clutching my arm. "Harrington got a telegram from Boston. New evidence has come to light. A general has come forward with letters. Proof, Miss Bradford. Proof of your father's innocence." Hope, fierce and blinding, shot through me. "That's why they're coming tonight," Max realized, his face grim. "Harrington knows his case is falling apart. They're not coming to arrest you, Lily. They're coming to silence you. Permanently." The wind screamed outside. The sound of hoofbeats, faint at first, then growing louder, could be heard over the storm. They were here. "We have to run," Eleanor urged. "No," Max said, his jaw set. He grabbed his rifle. "We make our stand here, on my land, by my rules." The fight for my life, for my father's honor, wasn't coming anymore. It was here. It was now. And the storm outside was nothing compared to the one that was about to break inside our walls. "They're on the North Ridge," Max yelled over the wind. Thomas spotted their torches. "We have to move now." His plan was desperate, a gamble born of chaos. "We evacuate," he commanded. "But we don't run. We choose the ground." The plan was to split up, a decoy. Thomas and Jacob would take Eleanor in a bundle that looked like a woman in the dark and ride hard for an old mining cabin in the hills. They were to make sure they were seen. "You and I," he said, his eyes locking with mine, "we head in the opposite direction, toward town." It was insane, running toward the enemy. "It's the last place they will expect," he explained, his voice urgent. "There's an old root cellar halfway there, part of the original settlement. It connects to the abandoned mines. We can disappear." We scrambled to the back of the house where the horses were waiting. Just as Thomas, Jacob, and Eleanor galloped north, a shout came from the front of the house. They were inside. "Go!" Max yelled, and we spurred our horses south, plunging into the storm-lashed trees. Gunshots cracked behind us. They'd spotted us. The chase was on. The forest was a nightmare of whipping branches and sucking mud. A bullet whizzed past my ear, and Max dragged me from my horse. "They're too close," he yelled. "We go on foot." He slapped the horses' rumps, sending them crashing off down the trail as a diversion. He grabbed my hand, and we plunged into the thickest part of the underbrush, away from any path. Men and horses couldn't follow easily here. The sounds of pursuit grew louder. They were good. They were relentless. Lightning flashed, illuminating a deep, rain-swollen ravine just ahead of us. A single slick log stretched across the churning water. "Our bridge," Max said grimly. He went first, moving with a soldier's balance. Then it was my turn. I was halfway across, heart pounding, when they broke through the trees behind me. "There they are!" a voice roared. "Keep moving, Lily!" Max yelled, raising his rifle to provide covering fire. Gunfire erupted. Bullets splintered the log around my feet. I scrambled the last few feet, and Max's hand grabbed mine, pulling me to safety just as a volley of shots tore into the log where I'd been standing. We scrambled through the trees on the other side, finally reaching a hidden trapdoor at the base of an ancient juniper tree. Max heaved it open, revealing stone steps leading down into absolute blackness. We descended into the damp, earthy dark. Max pulled the door shut and slid a heavy beam into place, sealing us in. He lit a lantern, and its warm glow pushed back the oppressive darkness. We were in a small, stone-walled chamber. Safe. For now. "They won't find us tonight," he said, his breath coming in ragged gas. We huddled by a small iron stove as Max built a fire. The distant rumbles of the storm were the only sound. "What now?" I whispered into the quiet. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice low and determined. "We find a way to get Eleanor's news out. We expose Harrington. We clear your name. And we make Stone pay for every single thing he's done." He looked at me, his gray eyes intense in the flickering lantern light. "We fight this together, Lily, to the end." His words were a promise, a vow. In that small, dark hole, surrounded by enemies, I had never felt less alone. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but for the first time, it was joined by something else. Hope. A dangerous, defiant hope. The world thought Lillian Bradford was a traitor, a fugitive, but they were about to find out she was something else entirely. She was a survivor, and she was ready to fight back. We emerged from the root cellar at midday into a world washed clean by the storm. The forest was quiet, deceptively peaceful. "Doc Reynolds' place is 5 miles that way," Max said, pointing southeast. "We stay off the roads. Stay in the trees." The journey was a tense trek through the wilderness. Every snapped twig, every startled bird call made my heart leap into my throat. Max moved with a quiet confidence that calmed my frayed nerves. His limp, a steady rhythmic counterpoint to our cautious steps. We were on the outskirts of Redemption Springs, just within sight of the doctor's house, when the trap was sprung. "That's far enough, Sullivan." Edgar Stone stepped out from behind a stand of cottonwoods, a pistol held casually in his hand. 2 of his rifle-toting thugs fanned out behind him. They'd anticipated our move. They'd been waiting. Max pushed me behind him. "How did you find us, Stone?" Stone smiled his oily smile. "You're predictable, always running to your friends. Now be a sensible fellow. Hand over the woman, and I might let you live. I've always wanted the Circle S. It would make a fine addition to my empire." "So that's what this is about," Max growled. "Not justice, just greed." "Miss Bradford's predicament was merely a convenient opportunity," Stone admitted without a hint of shame. "Now step aside. I'm done playing games." "You'll have to shoot me," Max said, his voice flat and final. "Max, no!" I whispered, grabbing his arm. His life wasn't worth my freedom. "It is to me," he said, his eyes never leaving Stone's. "How tedious," Stone sighed and raised his pistol, aiming for Max's heart. I didn't think. I reacted. I threw myself in front of Max, a desperate, foolish shield. A shot rang out. I flinched, bracing for the impact, the searing pain, but it never came. Instead, one of Stone's men crumpled to the ground. Then another shot, and the second thug fell, clutching his shoulder. A third shot ripped the pistol from Stone's hand. "Drop your weapons! Federal marshals!" 4 men in dusty coats emerged from the trees, rifles leveled, their silver badges glinting in the sun. These were not the hired thugs from the road. These men were the real thing. Behind them, looking both grim and relieved, was Dr. Reynolds. Stone stared, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. This isn't over. Harrington has the evidence. She'll hang. I think not, Mr. Stone, said the lead marshal, a man with iron gray hair and an air of absolute authority. John Harrington is in our custody, facing charges of conspiracy and falsifying evidence. He turned to me, his stern expression softening. Miss Bradford, I'm Marshal James Foster. We've been looking for you. He produced a folded document. I have here a formal letter of exoneration for you and your late father. General Meade himself has come forward with evidence of the Colonel's secret service to the Union. Your father's name has been cleared. He's been recognized as the hero he always was. The world spun, exonerated, innocent, free. The words were too big to comprehend. Max's hand found mine, his grip a firm, grounding anchor in the swirling chaos of my emotions. What about Stone? Max asked, his voice tight. He'll be joining Harrington in a federal jail, Foster replied grimly. Attempted murder, hiring men to impersonate federal officers. We have a long list of charges. As they dragged a sputtering, protesting Stone away, I finally allowed the relief to wash over me. It was over. The nightmare was finally over. I turned to share the moment with Max and saw his face was pale, his hand pressed against his side. A dark stain was spreading across his shirt. Max, I gasped as he swayed on his feet. It's nothing, he grunted, but his knees buckled. Bullet grazed his side, Dr. Reynolds announced after a quick examination. Must have happened when Stone fired at you. Max moved to shield you and caught the bullet himself. He'd taken a bullet for me, without a second's hesitation. Worth it, Max whispered, his eyes finding mine, as the world started to go dark around him. We got him to the doctor's house, and for days I didn't leave his side. While he healed, the truth came out. Eleanor Quinn, it turned out, was the real hero. Her frantic ride hadn't just warned us. She'd ridden all the way to Carson City to alert the real authorities. The tough old hotel owner had saved us all. A week later, a letter arrived from the governor confirming my exoneration and reinstating my father's military pension, with all back pay awarded to me. I was no longer destitute. I could go anywhere. Back to Boston, back to my old life. What will you do now? Max asked from his bed, his voice still weak but his eyes clear. Is that what you want me to do? I asked softly. Go back? He looked away. I want you to be happy, Lily. And what if my happiness is here, I pressed, in this dusty town, at the Circle S, with you? The carefully constructed walls around his heart finally crumbled. Lily, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. After Ruth and Sarah, I never thought... I know, I said, taking his hand. We have ghosts, but we also have a future, if we're brave enough to take it. He gripped my hand, his strength returning. When Stone shot at you, he confessed, all I could think was that I couldn't lose you too. I couldn't go back to that empty house, that silent life. You won't, I promised. I'm staying right here. Good, he breathed, a real smile finally reaching his eyes. Because Redemption Springs is going to need a strong woman beside its new mayor. My eyebrows shot up. The town council, desperate for honest leadership after Stone's reign of terror, had offered the position to Max. He was going to accept. He was choosing to live again, to lead. He reached into the drawer of his bedside table and pulled out a small, worn velvet box. Inside was a simple gold ring with a single, perfect pearl. Lillian Bradford, he said, his voice shaking just a little. You brought music back into my life. Will you marry me? Tears of joy streamed down my face. Around us, a new life was beginning. For me, for Max, for the town of Redemption Springs. My father's name was honored, my own freedom was won, and the man who had bought me for a debt had just offered me his heart. I had come to this territory in chains, sold for $300. But in the end, I had found something priceless. I had found redemption. I had found home. And I said yes. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption on the frontier, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a new tale. And let us know in the comments below. What do you think is the true price of freedom? Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.